Hello there, everybody. Welcome back to Star Wars Lads for this week's live Q&A. Hopefully, you're all having a great Tuesday so far. We appreciate you all for joining us tonight on our latest live stream. So, as you probably saw in the chat, and you might have seen by just the different thumbnail and all that type of stuff, we've been wanting to experiment with our lives for a while now. We've been kind of doing the same thing for years on our live streams. We started doing let's plays and video games, and then taking your guys' questions and just talking during the gameplay. So that was a lot of fun to start, but as things evolved, we then, switched to the review format live and then took your guys' questions. It's kind of turned into a news live Q&A format show. And that's been great for a while. And we had a lot of fun doing all that and talking the news and all that. But as many of you know, there's basically zero Star Wars news these days. We get very little nowadays. And oftentimes when we do get it, it's after our Tuesday streams. And then now we've got to wait a week to talk about it. And it's at that point kind of old news. And so we've been discussing ways to, change that and be a little bit more active and really just present when news comes out while also still giving, the live format because we do really enjoy talking with you all and taking your guys' questions and all of that and making this format a little bit more consumable for everybody. I mean, we know these long 2-hour streams aren't necessarily the most consumable for everyone, and it's hard for people to kind of miss one and then go back into it. So we thought, we'll divide things up. Now right now we're in a dead period for Star Wars. There's really not much news coming out at all. Half the time we're kind of stretching for things to talk about just to have a topic header. Now we're not going to do that. We're just going to make it a Q&A. So every Tuesday we'll take your guys' questions. Doesn't matter what it is. It can still be anything. It doesn't have to be Star Wars related, but you're going to be able to send in anything you want. And outside of my preamble this week, where I'll take up the first few minutes of the stream, most of the times we're just going to go straight into your guys' questions. So it's going to be a good hour to hour and a half straight of your guys' questions, which should hopefully get more and more people into the chat, help more people be able to have a chance to ask a question, because it's not going to be, just a thing we cram in at the end of our news streams. And so when we do have news, if it's on a Tuesday, then we might delay our Q&A to a different day and just do news. If it's on a Wednesday or Thursday or whatever, we're going to try to do a news stream around the same time that we always do, but on that specific day that the news breaks, so we can talk to all of you about it when we have something to talk about and it's not old news by the time we get to talk about it. So that's kind of our vision here for the future. As always, it's pretty much the same thing other than that with the Q&A format. It is still, your guys' questions. Ask us anything you want. It doesn't have to be Star Wars related. It can be about any single topic you'd like, but we want to get everybody in there. So we are going to lay some kind of new ground rules for the way our chats are going to work. The basis is still basically the same. We are still taking chats. It is first come, first serve. It is, bypassable by Patreon or YouTube membership programs if you're of a certain tier. And also, if you send in any form of super chat, we will, answer your question immediately. The twist we are going to throw in is, and we've talked about this in the past, but we haven't stuck to it as much, but we are going to really focus on the kind of like 2 questions per person in the order before we cycle back. So you can ask more than 2 questions. Just we're going to start with 2 from one person, then go to the next person, then go to the next person. Try to get as many people in to the chat as possible and answer as many different voices and questions as we possibly can as we get through our streams every single week. So hopefully that allows more of you to be able to ask what you would like to us and get to your guys' questions, because sometimes, you ask a question 20 minutes into the stream, you might never get on stream with all the questions we get early. So we still encourage you to send in your questions early. We'd still love you to be, doing that. We really appreciate all the questions. So it's not really a, a knock against sending in bulk questions. It is just we're just going to cycle through as many as we can. That way, we can get as many voices in and create as many conversations as possible. As we talked about a few weeks ago, we are starting kind of a new video series that we've been putting on our channel recently. It's been a few weeks since we've had one because we've had a lot of book reviews and Star Wars visions and stuff to talk about recently. So we are going to be still clipping some of these segments from the Q&As. So if you ask a question, one of your questions might be picked for our new video series, Fan Question of the Week. We're going to take one of your guys' questions, our answers, we're going to edit it down, put it out as a video. That way you get a little bit more recognition by the channel as a whole. So make sure you send in your question. You have a chance to be the question of the week. We're also going to be headlining these titles after the streams are over because obviously we don't know what the topics are right now until you guys ask them. So once you guys ask them, your question might be one of the head topics of the stream as well. So those are some other ways you can directly interact with us. There's that top fan thing now as well that we have to figure out some way to kind of see how that works and really incorporate that into the streams as well, because that seems like a fun new feature they've added. And there's also the hype feature now on all videos and streams as well. Once the streams are over, I believe, once they become videos, which usually takes about 24 hours after the stream ends for YouTube to kind of process it and create it as a video file rather than a live stream file. You can hype those up, and then also that should boost the video and the algorithm. So those are all kind of new features that are coming out. But yeah, that's the gist of the way we see this. It will be a shorter live stream. Again, that's kind of the reason is to kind of make it a little more consumable rather than these 2.5 hour live streams, and just to try to give you a little bit more every single week. So we are going to be keeping it a lot tighter with our run times, but hopefully that can create a little bit quicker discussion and more discussion throughout all the coming weeks as we focus purely on Q&A moving forward for these streams. But don't worry, if you want to talk news, we are going to try to cover every news story that is like big that people want to talk about as they're happening, the days and weeks they come out, rather than waiting a whole week after, because it really does feel like it never fails for our channel that we get news on Wednesdays after we've already done a Tuesday live stream. So that's what we're changing. That's the format we've come up with so far. If you guys have any thoughts, criticisms, any things you'd like to see, let us know in the chat, because obviously this is an experiment for week one. We're still kind of going to fine tune it and tweak it over the next few weeks. So let us know in the chat if you're watching on replay, or in the comments if you're watching on replay, or the chat if you're watching right now, what you think, and if you have any suggestions as well, because we are very open to hearing from everybody. All right, let's get into the chat then. And the first question is from Critical Thinker 066, who asks thoughts on Tomasi's Detective Comics run. I think it's pretty fun and underrated because people don't talk about it too much. I have not read it. I believe that's the one. So that's the one on who we got Tinian's run, and then it's Tomasi right after, I believe. I did not read that one. Again, like I've said in the past, I kind of stopped after Rebirth, and then I've tried to get back in it, but it's there's so many to read that I'm still very far behind. But I've tried to catch up with the Batman title, going into Zdarsky's stuff and then the current line. I still haven't finished most of it, but trying to catch up there when I can. But I have not read it, but I'm glad to hear it's an underrated run. I know for me personally, it was something I was excited for because of Tomasi, but I didn't hear really anybody talking about it, and I didn't hear that great of things when it did come out. So it's one of the reasons I did fall behind, but glad to hear it's a good run.
Yeah, not really something I can answer, unfortunately. If you guys are new to the stream, I am a more of a DC animation, DC movies kind of guy. Comics, that's Liam's realm. You can probably see in his background, he's got a bunch of omnibuses, so that's not something I can really comment too much on. But just to let you guys know, if you guys are wondering why I'm a little quiet.
Next one is thoughts on Snyder's Justice League run. Thought it had some fun, interesting concepts and ideas, but I like a lot of his work from after metal to death metal. The execution wasn't as good as he usually is. I agree with that as well. I read the first half of Snyder's Justice League run. That was one that I was interested in singles as well because it was Scott Snyder. Um, but I didn't love it. It was good. It was fine, but it wasn't his Batman work. It wasn't his top tier work. So I was a little disappointed. I did like Dark Knight's Metal. I thought that was a fun event. I didn't read Death Metal yet though. So I'm behind on that, but I did enjoy his work. I think he does a good job with pretty much everything he writes. And so even the things that aren't as good are still pretty good for the most part. And he's been killing it again recently with all his new stuff and Absolute Batman and all that. So yeah, definitely a run I want to finish one day. Anthony Tiff says, been rereading Revenge of the Sith. Again, I love the stories that Anakin talks about, how much his childhood on Tatooine with the Sun Dragons. I love the idea of the Dead Star Dragon in Anakin's heart. And I like how Mike Chin reintroduces that in his short story Brotherhood, where a dying Anakin remembers his mother's stories of him having a Sun Dragon heart. What allegories or metaphors do you think these stories are meant to mean for Anakin? It's a great question. I need to definitely read Revenge of the Sith again to remember exactly the way it's phrased because it has been maybe a decade since I've read the book, and I do want to order that deluxe edition. Um, but I think it's trying to symbolize, from what I remember, is just the fact that Tatooine is so a part of him. It's something that, even at his core, uh, he is somebody whose origins and roots are there. It's everything he hates about kind of Anakin, the things that ground him to his past life. It never leaves him. It's something he's dealing with for his whole life as Darth Vader, as a Jedi Knight, as a member of the Jedi Council in Revenge of the Sith, somebody who constantly is trying to prove to other people that he's more than his past. I think that's something that is at the heart and core of that character, is not just his anger and resentment about things that have happened to him in his past, the tragedies and horrors that have befallen him in his life during his time on Tatooine, the things that happened to his mother, the way he grew up as a slave, but the fact that he carries all of that and has to continually feel like he has to prove it to people. He's the chosen one and he's from such humble beginnings. I think a lot of that stuff goes back to his core of what Tatooine means to him, and obviously it comes back in the fold for the Skywalker family over and over again. So definitely looking forward to my reread when I get my deluxe edition. But from what I remember, that's kind of where I would go with with my theories.
Yeah, no, I'm also someone that hasn't read the book in a long, long time. But I'm looking at the Wikipedia page. Some pretty interesting stories told about how George Lucas didn't even like the whole concept of the Sun Dragon, which is very interesting. I mean, he's not really someone that tells like the creatives in Star Wars whether or not to like completely change a huge plot line and stuff, but he's the kind of guy who'd always like look at some aesthetics or details that he's like, this has to change, or maybe why don't you focus on this and that. So yeah, I mean, George apparently protested against Stover. Stover was very upset and started yelling obscenities, saying that like, I don't have time. And this is apparently all in the 20th anniversary deluxe that I think you've probably been rereading if you have the deluxe. And he's like, we need the changes by tomorrow. And George's reasoning is that it made George feel like the story was something outside of Anakin that was driving him towards the dark, that it was something acting on him instead of his own choices. And he protested that the dragon was the central image for Anakin's anger. All right, that's what Stover is saying. George probably saw it a different way. And very interesting. Yeah, I mean, we know that the Sun Dragon, as reintroduced in Mike Chen's Brotherhood, is this like mythological creature, lives within the hearts of stars. In Legends, I believe, like for him, it like started giving him this sort of fear when him and Obi-Wan saw like the death of a star and what that meant to him. And it's a common mythological story on Tatooine. Shmi told him that he has the strongest heart in the galaxy. It always guided him to do what he wanted to do, whatever he needed it to, right? And Yeah, I mean, it's 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 interesting, right? I don't know what I would personally say about the Sun Dragon that wasn't already written. Like, I don't know if I have a necessarily my own interpretation. It's very interesting that Anakin kind of keeps it close to chest, and the way it's described is like even when um, Emperor Palpatine felt the disturbance in the Force about, Luke Skywalker, and he couldn't really necessarily find it. Like it's almost like he's shielded by this sort of Sun Dragon, by the mythology of the Sun Dragon, the same way that Anakin, there are some things that he's always kept guarded, even that Palpatine wouldn't know. So it's a very interesting concept. I don't think that it's meant to say anything more than like Anakin at the end of the day, despite his fall, despite his corruption, despite the things that have shaped his childhood, he will ultimately do the right thing. He ultimately will heed his childhood lessons, the love that permeated throughout his, tougher upbringing than most people's and all that. And I think that's what it's meant to symbolize, that even with everything destroyed, right, there will still be something that is so purely Anakin that will be what his destiny is meant to be, for what it'll be, what his ultimate choice is, right? Which is to save his son, right? After obviously Palpatine can't figure out exactly about Luke, but then it becomes a whole obsession for him throughout the trilogy once he finds out. And then what is his final dying act? Protecting his son, making a choice of love that takes him out of this shell, out of this destruction that he has been seeping himself into year after year, and he dies seeing his son with his real eyes for once, right? Like it's the thing that he's kept so closely guarded, himself, that version of Anakin, like it becomes fully embodied, right? He almost becomes in some ways like the Sun Dragon, right? At the very end, I guess I could look at it that way. That's like it's the purest form, despite everything shattering around him. That's where the image becomes clearest once it's gone. And the image of Vader, once it's shattered, once it's decimated, slowly, progressively, as he fights Palpatine again and again and again, but finally sacrifices himself, not for power, not for be with his son, but to like ensure that his son lives, that he can do something as his father, as Anakin. That's when I guess the Sun Dragon is fully embodied. So that's how I would look at it. Again, I this is like one. I'm not like Liam where I have like a shelf where I collect all these books. I'm definitely a guy like reading Master Evil on like my Kobo. Like I like to keep all my stuff accessible to me on the go, right? And I do like reading from libraries, stuff like that. I'm not necessarily a collector, but when I see something like the Revenge of the Sith Deluxe Edition with how much time and effort and all these editorial notes, I definitely love reading books that have editorial notes. Like I have a copy of Frankenstein that I had to get for a class in college that has a bunch of editorial notes, and I just really liked it because it was like a science fiction film class, and then it was just like, okay, but here's like some interesting developments, thoughts, like things that have come from Mary Shelley's work, which she's inspired, what she was actually hinting at stuff before she even realized were real things and stuff like that. So I loved everything I've seen image wise. So it might be the first one that I collect. I'm not someone that like goes for like even like an inkstone or something else where just like, oh, there's a little bit of coloring on the page and all that. But Stover's Revenge of the Sith, when I remember picking up, it was a special book to read that time. So perhaps I'll read this. Perhaps I'll get a little bit better understanding of the Sun Dragon and all these other notes and the process of creating this version of Revenge of the Sith from the shooting script.
Anthony also asks, would you guys like to see a TV series, animated or otherwise, that is an anthology that goes over the different Tatooine stories slash legends that Anakin heard from his mother, including the ones about the Sun Dragon? That's interesting. I mean, I think it would work better. That type of thing sounds like it would work better as a comic book or an animated series rather than live action. I don't see that being much of a sell in live action. I don't really see it being much of a sell in animation either, to be honest. I think what I would love to see as a variation of that is just Star Wars Tales kind of come back as a full series, to have in a Visions esque way a bunch of short films, Star Wars short films that are fully animated, that last from 20 to 25 minutes and tell different stories that are canon. Some could be non-canon, but just bring that idea to Star Wars animation. I think that would be a lot of fun, because the thing with Visions is like it's supposed to be stylized. It's supposed to be anime. It's supposed to have Japanese ideology. It's supposed to have Japanese themes. It's supposed to have Japanese style, other than season two, obviously. But in the same way, it's supposed to invoke each culture that's creating it. It's supposed to be an alternate take because Star Wars is, an American property. It's created by an American person. I would love to see Tales come back. And I think we are kind of doing that with Tales of the Jedi, Tales of the Bounty Hunter, all that. But to me, as I've said many times before, like I think we just need more things on Disney Plus. And if it's something that you don't have to tell a complete story, it can just be a different episode every week. Things like that will keep, people coming back for the most part, Star Wars fans coming back if it's good. So I would love to take your idea and yes, use Tatooine stories, tell Tatooine, cool Tatooine legends, stuff like that, but do it with a series that tells other things as well than just a big Tales-esque series. It was kind of that was my idea basically for the Dark Times show that I pitched a few years ago, and it still remains the same thing. Like the Clone Wars, as much as we feel like it was this long, linear, coherent TV show, most of the seasons weren't. It told stories that were all in arcs. It told stories that took place at different times. Season 1 and 2 were a lot of standalone episodes. I think we can get back to telling stories that way for Star Wars, and it keeps it fresh. It allows jumping on points for new viewers. You can pick and choose which story arcs you want to see. So, in that same vein, I think your idea, Anthony, can be a part of something greater, and we can tell stories all around. But Star Wars has been willing to do that since the early 2000s with the Tales series, the comic book series, and I think it would be something that would be perfectly fitting for animation. I mean, go back to classic animation seasons, do an episode every week for 22, 25 weeks, and every episode's different, so it keeps people coming back for something else. Like I think that's something that streaming TV is missing. Is just that long form engagement. It's missing people being invested in something over time, and I think that would be something that can be lower effort in terms of like you don't have to come up with a creative arc for all these characters. You don't have to, develop something over a bunch of seasons. You just tell Star Wars stories, bring in creators to tell Star Wars stories. And in the same way as Visions, you can say, hey, this one is from Pixar, this episode. Hey, this one is from uh another famous director. Like if Tim Burton came in and wanted to do an episode, like you could bring people in and different talent and tell different stories. So I think that's a cool idea. I want them to do more stuff like that. I think Visions only reiterated how much more I want that type of stuff, because it doesn't have to be the only thing we get. It could just be another thing we get, and that's kind of the weird place we are with Star Wars right now. Is it just seems like the mentality is, well, we can only have one animated show going at once. But like, why? That doesn't make sense. We can have more than one. It doesn't have to be just one thing. And so hopefully we get back to those days of possibly having more than one thing at a time.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure exactly how I would go about it. Like, I do like a lot of what Liam says with his whole big arcs of like a dark time show where you can kind of just play around with it, or do stuff where you invite other Western creatives like Pixar to have a little bit of a say and voice. And then we've seen already like Studio Ghibli, they did like the little dust mites from My Neighbor Totoro with Baby Grogu, right? So it's like when we're already seeing Star Wars kind of open up and be able to play with some of these like mythological, spiritual, more fantastical takes on Star Wars that aren't necessarily rooted in like a canon or anything like that. So yeah, I mean, I I I don't know if I would love it like a full TV series, like Liam said, like of like it specifically just being about the mythologies. I just don't see how you would sell that, unfortunately, and especially not in this climate. I think it'd be pretty interesting if they did something like how Forces of Destiny was originally on like YouTube and stuff. Maybe you do like a little YouTube kind of short series of like different stuff, like different tales being told. I think Shmi could be a recurring character if done that way, but I would like it if these are like stories that are told across Tatooine to be told across by people on Tatooine. I'd love to see a hut perspective of Tatooine. I'd love to see the droids. I'd love to see the little biker gang that we see at the Book of Boba Fett, like the different cultures and different eras of Tatooine explored through these different subgroups, these different entities, like everybody, right? Like I don't think someone who's at the cantina in Mos Eisley is going to tell the same exact story as someone who lives in a moisture farm or someone who lives in a cave like Obi-Wan, right? And this is a great way I think too of like telling like stories that aren't necessarily about these different Tatooine stories and legends, but also like a way to like maybe recanonize some parts in a way of like the Kenobi novel from John Jackson Miller, of like, oh, this is like a story about this one weird guy that it doesn't have to fit 100% with Obi-Wan Kenobi show, but you can be like, oh yeah, this was possibly an adventure that happened, maybe not the exact same time, right? I'd love to see like the Tusken Raiders talk about the myths and legends, like Tatooine, obviously, because of the nature of Star Wars being created in the 70s and filmmaking and the advances that it actually had to drag it forward with, there was no way of like really having strong alien leads, like not in a way that felt fitting for the universe. Like you could still have characters like Akbar and stuff, but we weren't at that point yet where they could lead fully. Like even a Chewbacca, like imagine if we had Peter Mayhew's voice, like it'd be a very different sort of film franchise of different universe, right? We don't have that same issue now. Now we have animation, we have so many different mediums, we have so much better technology to tell this storytelling and be very creative about it. So I'd love to see stuff like that. And it doesn't always have to even be told as like old stories, right? It could be almost like the shamanistic dance with the little insect bug that Boba Fett takes up his nose, right? And then he gets into a trance and vision. You can have like a whole episode like this where it just you get to see like a very interesting perspective and it doesn't have to be told in any way, right? And if you guys have seen our Visions coverage, we loved Star Wars Black. Like that one, there's nothing that ties it to any specific thing. It looks like it could be stuff on Death Star 1, some on 2, some on Hoth. Some of it's from the pilot perspective. Sometimes it's just, this one armless stormtrooper dancing with like the good, the bad, the past, the future, the present, the delusion, the reality, everything, right? And it's such a unique vision into what Star Wars can be. And in the same way, I think you can kind of do shorts like this where you can give certain perspectives, certain visions of people on Tatooine. So if I were to do it, I think a YouTube mini collection, like mini sodes of sorts, like almost like 2003 Clone Wars, where you can just kind of focus more on the style and while you're telling the story, I think that would be really cool to see. Like Liam said, though, it's probably more suited for like a mini series of comics, if anything. Like if this is like a way, like a festival on Tatooine or something, where everybody, regardless of if you're a bounty hunter or if you're just a school of children, you all kind of go here. It's just one of the few things that you see. I know there probably might be critics of that because they're like, "Oh, Tatooine's supposed to be like the furthest point away from the galaxy," but that concept was always dead once like we return to it in Return of the Jedi, in my opinion. And then we see things like KOTOR talking about like ancient technologies, and this planet wasn't always a full desert scape. Like Tatooine has a rich, varied history. So I wouldn't mind if we can kind of like play into some of that stuff with the storytelling, with these tales, recanonize some older elements, stuff like that. I don't know if it just has to be necessarily Shmi. I think that's one thing I'd push against because I love Shmi, but I think she works better in glimpses and little moments as opposed to like making her a character where she's like ongoing. Like it makes the loss of her way more impactful. It makes like what little lessons that she did impart onto Anakin, what they shared in their 9 years that we'll never truly explore day to day of. But like if we get something like this, you can understand what she partook in, like the rituals that she shared with her son, the things that they had back and forth, things that Anakin might have forgotten. And if you do like one or two shorts out of like 15 minisodes, then I think that's like the right balance. You should have her be a character. I do like the concept, but maybe not like the end all be all because at the end of the day, she's not even from Tatooine, right? She's a slave that's sold into from Gardula the Hutt into Watto's hold and kind of lives amongst the slave quarters, right? Amongst so many other people who aren't also from Tatooine. At least the Legends version of it. I'm not sure how it is in canon. So even what she would know has some limitations.
Badasai says, I'm currently reading The Realm of the Elderlings, a 16-book series, and it's truly fantastic fantasy. Totally recommend. Definitely worth checking out, then. I'll add it to the list of a million things that I would like to read. But yeah, definitely. I've heard of it too, so that sounds interesting. Um, Always looking for good fantasy, but when I one day catch up on everything else, I'll add it to the list. But yeah, let us know when you finish it. Let me know where you would rank it kind of around other fantasy series you've read and whether you think it's worth reading over some other things.
If I'm reading this right, elderlings are humans that have been changed by interaction with dragons or by consuming dragon scales or blood. So very topical once we're talking about all the sun dragon stuff here. So a nice little connection there, Batisai. If I'm reading this right, is it part of the Farseer world that's kind of there? Like the Farseer trilogy is the first of 5 series set in the realm of the elderlings. Okay, very interesting. Okay, yeah, and this is a series from 1995 to does Renegades Magic end the series? I'm not sure, but yeah, no, I mean, I'd love to check it out. Uh, oh, the author was born in Berkeley, California. That's where we went to college. Very interesting. So yeah, no, I'd love to, like Liam said, get into more fantasy. Right now, I've been so many stops and starts with the Wheel of Time. Obviously, the TV show got canceled too. Just the nature of streaming and not making a big expansive show with big merchandise. But I enjoyed that. I was reading the books before then. Just stopped and started. It's been like about a year since I picked it up again. I have the Tolkien illustrated versions of Hobbit, Silmarillion, and The Lord of the Rings, and I want to like just crack that open one day. Um, I'm not so much of a Percy Jackson fan as I used to be. I think it was perfect as a middle school, but then I've heard the fandom's a little too insane and crazy, and they don't all love the show. I didn't particularly love season one, but I am looking for stuff. I'm trying to read what was that one fantasy series? I was just rewatching Stranger Things with a friend. Um, uh, get from what is this? Yeah, I'm trying to maybe I might read like Ursula's Earthsea trilogy, or it was a trilogy. Now it's like 5 books before it got concluded. I heard that's like a child fantasy that everybody kind of loves to read because it was like it's designed for children, but she always kind of scoffed at the idea of it's only for children. It's almost like a Harry Potter. It should be like expansive old. Trying to get a little bit more into fantasy that isn't super hardcore rule based. I know that's like a very big thing now in epic fantasy, like with Sanderson and everything. A high fantasy of having like very structured magic systems and like different generations and ages being like very meticulously detailed. I like that, but I also think growing up in this era where we have so many rules to everything, even stuff like Witcher and all that, like they have very specific subsets of rules and like politics and organizations and regions. Like, kind of want to go back to just reading fantasy that's just pure, that doesn't necessarily have limitations. So if this is a series that kind of leans into that, has a little bit less limitations, more like Lord of the Rings, where it's like undefined magic, undefined ideas, kind of things that are built up over time. Not necessarily retcons, but just as the world opens up. Yeah, I'd love to check out the series.
Next up, we have, I believe, Permafrost Texas TX, who says, I saw Return of the Jedi in a theater with a live orchestra playing all the music. It was a little expensive, but totally worth it. So check your local symphony orchestra if you've never been to one before. Well, that's very cool. That's a cool experience. I've seen it actually live as well. I went and saw it at the Hollywood Bowl when it was there a few years ago on the 40th anniversary, and that was awesome as well. So definitely recommend for everybody out there who haven't gotten to see Return of the Jedi in the theater, but especially with a live orchestra, it's definitely a different experience. It's really fun.
I can't say that I've done that, unfortunately. I'd love to one day. Um, I had a friend who like randomly we were hanging out. He's like, "Oh, I got to go to a concert," and I'm like, "Oh, what concert?" He's like, "Oh, I'm just seeing John Williams." I'm like, "What? This is something that I definitely would like to be informed about." This is a couple years ago, but I don't think it was like a full accompaniment. I think it was just him doing a bunch of his different scores throughout films. But yeah, I'd love to see something like. I don't think I've done it for anything. I know they did one for like Lord of the Rings way back, some Indiana Jones ones. Yeah, just some big franchise. I think Blade Runner also got one, which is very interesting to see. But yeah, we'll see one day.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a cool experience. I mean, just anything with a live orchestra is always really neat. Just both for like the way the sound comes in, but also, hearing it from one spot versus kind of surround sound. It's different. It's really interesting. I think the only other thing I've seen like that was when I went and saw, and this was for school, when we were in film school, and I went and saw for one of my film classes at the Silent Film Festival in San Francisco, the Charlie Chaplin compilation they had, and that had a live pianist who was playing to the films, and that was really really cool. And that was I remember that being a long day because I didn't have a car back then. It was my freshman year, and I had to take the train over, and it was at like 8 in the morning. This Charlie Chaplin Silent Film Festival compilation. I remember fighting sleep for the first like 25 minutes of it, but once I woke up, it was a fun time. So yeah, definitely a cool experience. Next up is as Permafrost as well. It says, "What are your favorite Thanksgiving foods?" I like that question. It's very different. Every year, our family gets into a disagreement over mashed potatoes or whether or not they should be smooth, chunky, or if they should have skins. Smooth, no skins is the correct answer, by the way. Well, my family has always done it smooth, no skins as well. That's the way we've always had mashed potatoes. And I can't say I disagree with you. I absolutely love that style. I love chunky as well. Skins can be hit and miss, but I think put enough butter and garlic and things, then they always taste good. But we usually, the way my grandmother does it is always just kind of lets you put your own stuff on there, your gravy and all that. So you put the butter in, you put the gravy on top, whatever you like is the way you make it. So she doesn't, make it hard and fast for everybody has to eat it the same way. But my favorite Thanksgiving food, I think, is stuffing. I just love stuffing. And as my grandma's stuffing is one of my favorites. So that's one of my favorite things. I think turkey, if you cook it right, and you also, have some like cranberry sauce or something else there, or kind of mix it in with the gravy. That's also great. My grandma also makes a great green bean casserole, which I really love, and sweet potatoes with brown sugar on it. Those are my favorite things. Though when I think of Thanksgiving, I think of the stuffing, the sweet potatoes, and the green bean casserole for the most part.
Hmm. I guess for me, I would say when it comes to the potatoes specifically, I agree. I don't think there's a hard and fast way of doing it. It just shouldn't be runny. I think that's like the one thing
Yeah.
I'm like, it's like if it if I can drink it, you're doing it wrong, right? Like if it's a little if it can be a little loose, but if it's like still like I have to kind of chew through it, or I'm like, okay, it might just be like it needs to settle for like a little bit. I'll eat that a little later, right? Something like that. Or I can mix in with gravy or with the stuffing and just make like a weird like mash of everything and eat it into one bite, right? That's fine. Or like having it with some green beans kind of mixed in there just for some solidity's sake. But if I am like truly wanting to have good, mashed potatoes, it's got to be creamy. It's got to have a lot of garlic. I love a lot of garlic on mine. Just it should be like dripping almost for me. Um, and this is just like from like having family friends like kind of we do it all like together, and I don't think we're doing it this year, but like whenever we have that, whenever I see it, I'm like, yes, finally somebody who takes my Indian sensibilities of I want seasoning and then adding it to potatoes. And I had a period early COVID where I was just eating so much different potato salad, so my requisites, I would say, for potatoes have definitely increased over the years. It's a very versatile root, but now when you're mashing it, like now I have some certain standards in a way. So yeah, it doesn't even necessarily have to be like just yellow Yukon or whatever. It could be red potato salad. Like I don't mind that if we're gonna do red mashed potatoes, it can work. It's just a little bit more raw unless you cook it down a little bit better. That's like the one thing I'd argue. You have to that one almost has to be more just salt and pepper as opposed to garlic. It doesn't necessarily mix as well. I will say though, no skins. I think it's not that it can't be good, but it's just that more often than not, it's so hard to like keep it controlled based on each size, each piece that Sometimes one piece can be pretty good and be a nice little flakiness. Maybe got a little bit of like a burn on it, a little char on it, and that's where like the garlic or whatever seasoning gravy like lands and blends nicely. And then the other will just be like I just peeled it off a potato that I washed off, and it just stayed like that because it was in a weird moisture pocket. And I do not enjoy that. That kind of ruins it for me. And I'm someone who like loves eating food and I'm critical about food, but I also will eat mostly anything. But that's like that would be a pet peeve because it just would be like it's kind of like abandon the whole idea of the concept to me. So no to skins. Um, I like somewhere between smooth and chunky. Like I said, as long as it's not runny, we're good. But if you can make it where like I get a little bit of chew in one piece, but another one's a little bit softer, like yeah, I don't mind that. I like it a little bit like that. It gives it a little bit more naturalness. And to me, also like a lot of times, like the best stuff that I've had mashed potato wise has been like using a hand masher as opposed to using like a processor or something like that. So that gives me good vibes. But besides that, what do I like to eat? It's gotta be like mac and cheese. I think mac and cheese, like with a nice little bake on top of it, a little crispiness to it. I really like it that style. Some Brussels sprouts can be pretty good too. Gravy, sweet potatoes. Uh, Honestly, it doesn't really matter as long as I can like assemble from like whatever turkey leftovers there are and put it all in like one sandwich for like my next day meal. That's what matters to me. Like if the sides are good enough to carry at that point a pretty dry piece of turkey, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what it is about my neighbors and all the turkey that I've had in recent years. Just a little too dry for me. I think turkey just dries a little too fast in comparison to a chicken. So anytime I get like something juicy turkey wise, I'm like, put that in a box, preserve that for me, please, at least for one more day. I want to enjoy it like as it's meant to be. Because man, turkey just it gets dry so fast and it's frustrating.
Yeah, it does. And you really, like you said, to me, the next day is definitely when you load it up with all the leftovers and that you create your own thing, or you put it in a sandwich and you like toast it or something. But yeah, thanks for that question. Making me hungry, making me look forward to Thanksgiving. It's honestly, it's crazy how fast November's already going. I mean, the year's almost over. It's just it's been a very fast year, it feels like, at least from my point of view. But what are your favorites? Permafrost, let us know in the chats, or any of you. What are your favorite Thanksgiving foods? We have Skywalker's Academy says Star Wars is dead, and I enjoyed Visions though. Yeah, I know it is like a weird period for Star Wars. I mean, obviously we look forward to any Star Wars news that we can get or anything Star Wars to talk about on our channel, considering we're a Star Wars YouTube channel. But we we're kind of expecting a little boom here for Star Wars, a little kind of a minor renaissance period for Star Wars news here in October. And it was okay with the Ben Solo news breaking. I mean, that was a big thing, but we to end September we had the Mandalorian trailer and a Visions trailer like back to back weeks, and then the Ben Solo news a few weeks after that, and then Visions, but it just does not seem like anybody's really cared about any of those things, especially Mandalorian. And I'm kind of shocked because we had very timely this whole discussion on one of these live streams a week before the Mandalorian trailer dropped about like where is it and what's going on with the trailer and all that's like why are we not seeing anything? And both of us had kind of said, we'll at least get a trailer by Tron and by Avatar we should have like a sneak peek. But now it seems like Disney's completely just 180'd and pivoted fully to Avatar is not going to be the place to promote Mandalorian and Grogu. It's the place to promote Avengers Doomsday. And so that's going to, make an even steeper hill to climb for Mandalorian and Grogu. And it's just going to be interesting to see. Like 2026 has so much Star Wars coming out, but it just does not seem like the hype machine has started at all for any of it. And it does not seem like the general public has too much enthusiasm for what we have seen so far. So, very weird time to be Star Wars fans or people that at least live and breathe it every day.
Yeah, can't disagree with that. It's a bummer, like and if we're being honest, it kind of makes us a little worried about like dropping like original content. So we're a little bit more dependent on stuff like the lives, right? So that's why we're like let's experiment a little bit more. Let's give you guys a space where we have just fun time talking about Star Wars or whatever else media wise has been cool that you guys are into, or like recommendations or just things that you want to talk about, like Thanksgiving food, for example. And then news, we're trying to be a little bit more like just jump on it, right? As we find out, it'll be like quick 20-minute stream or something like that. Make it a clip later on for people who haven't seen it, some photos, and bam, like we're just adapting to the reality of Star Wars after Andor season 2 just took a break. And if we looked at our numbers during Andor season 2, we were a little disappointed coming into like April and May, but despite how short and weird that release schedule was, and if it did suit how season 2 was structured, we had like a great couple months come out of it, even though technically nothing else had dropped at that point. It was just Andor and then people kind of catching up to Andor, just like how season 1 of Andor really had a lot of legs that really developed out of it. Same thing happened in season 2. But since then, man, like at once we reached like July, just yeah, it's been rough. And Visions, like you mentioned, was really fun. I think you can check our reaction to like all the Volume 1 sequels and then our full review of every single short. Definitely the most balanced of all three Visions volumes for us. Maybe not necessarily the same exact highs, but it just was very consistent. It seemed like there was a maturity to a lot of these returning studios and the studios that were slotting into like, hey, this might be the last chance that we see a Visions here before like spin-off Vision series or something else takes its place if we don't get a guaranteed season 4 or volume 4, and let's see what we can do. And it felt really great. And I'm someone who still liked a lot of volume 2 because I think there were certain highs of volume 2 that I don't think even other than like Black really reached in volume 3, but volume 3 was just so solid in a way that volume 2 and especially volume 1 were just so inconsistent about. So definitely recommend checking that out. Like we were talking about, like these little stories about the sun dragon and all that. This is kind of what Visions allows you to do, and it's not from that Western based perspective that Star Wars is definitely heavily leaning on, but Star Wars again is a very reciprocal series. It's very much dependent on a lot of Asian mythology, on a lot of Hinduism, symbology, even words like Yoda, for example, is just purely an old Indian word from an ancient language, right? So, yeah, it's cool concepts like that that have always permeated, kind of always been at the foundational level of Star Wars. Now, where it's very interesting seeing the Eastern side of Star Wars actually now try to put their interpretations of maybe like Western ideas, right, and just with their way of presenting storytelling. But yeah, I mean, it's something that I think we had a little bit better marketing for, but maybe not as much marketing as Volume 2. It does seem like it's been tapering off. Maybe they're really holding off for the Ninth Jedi, and that's the weird thing because next year we're just gonna have so much. We're gonna have the Maul Shadow Lord series. I'm assuming that will be a little bit bigger than like Bad Batch lore wise, just because it seems like we might be getting a canonized Dark Talon of some sorts. It could maybe explain by the end like why he's on Malachor, why it seems like he's fought Vader at some point, what happened to Shadow Collective turn Crimson Dawn and everything like that is basically the last remaining chapter of his life, and this seems like the show to tell it. And I think that the fact that we've got Sam Witwer back, like just the profile of Maul since the late 2010s has really just exploded. Obviously, with his return in Clone Wars, something that shouldn't have worked, but it did. Right? We're gonna get Visions presents the Ninth Jedi. Right? We got like two almost prequel episodes with Volume 3, and now we're gonna get a full show out of that. Obviously, Mando and Grogu, and that's the first Star Wars movie we're gonna get. It's not maybe the ideal first one, but it's definitely very exciting to hear that. Um, yeah, I mean, all of that stuff is really cool. Books we don't really know too much about, but that we know we're gonna get like the Mike Chen um, Red Dawn or Red Dusk book about and NZ, or what's his the N7? Who's the droid character? The NX droid, the commando droid.
I completely forgot. I don't
Uh,
remember much of Outlaws.
what's his
um,
name? Because I do like him a lot.
yeah,
I feel
it
bad. ND5,
ends
ND5 is,
D5.
and everything that happens with him before he's with KVS. We're gonna get a lot of stuff next year. It feels like next year, like regardless of how the channel does it, we won't have this like depth kind of like we did after the first half of the year of Star Wars for us, right? So hopefully you guys stick around with that. New people who are watching replays years from now or weeks from now, whatever it may be, we're excited for next year. It's just we're definitely treading water in this back half year, and we were hoping Visions, Last Order, Master of Evil, that Hunt for Ben Solo news, stuff like that would give us a little bit more consistent build up. It hasn't. It's been giving us bumps, but then those bumps also go away pretty quickly. They're not as bad as it was a couple months ago, to be honest. But yeah, we're very excited for 2026 because we really need it, to be honest. But yeah, Visions was fun. Check it out if you guys haven't. I think a lot of people just with the discussion around the Sun Dragon, I think you guys would enjoy something like that. But yeah, I mean, if there's things in Star Wars that, from Legends that you want us to cover, things from canon that you want us to go back to, maybe now that we're like 10 years removed almost from The Force Awakens, what has changed about early canon versus current canon? We'd love to talk about that stuff, but maybe that's something you guys have to bring up a little bit more in like a live Q&A format like this, where, this is your space to kind of just share things about Star Wars you like and other franchises, but also things you might want to see us discuss a little bit more or make a video or something out of.
Jose says, "Will you guys talk about Stranger Things?" Yeah, I mean, if people bring it up, we'll talk about it on the on the stream. Um, I've been throwing around. We've been talking about for a while. Possibly if we have one of two strategies really for news in the future. I mean, we want to cover Star Wars news as it's coming out, the day it comes out. I think that's the big one for us. But we've thrown around covering other things besides Star Wars on the channel because obviously, I mean, we're a Star Wars channel, but we talk about all sorts of things on our on our live streams. So we talked about doing kind of maybe a weekly pop culture kind of non-Star Wars show in the future. So if Stranger Things, those types of releases are something you would like to hear us talk about, outside of just asking us what we thought on a live stream, let us know because it's something like we're kind of open to anything at this point. We're gonna be taking a lot more risks and trying a lot of new stuff in the next few months because I think at the earliest we're gonna get mall news, whether it's a trailer or the release date for the show. Mall will probably be first up. And if we don't get anything soon, it might end up coming out after Mandalorian and Grogu. But I would assume I kind of predicted February-ish release for Maul. And I'm still kind of holding to that until we get to the turn of the year. But every month that goes by, it seems like less and less likely that that will be the case. And I wouldn't be shocked if some of these 2026 things also get moved to 2027 if if things aren't progressing the way they want. So we shall see. But yeah, if you want to hear us talk about more things besides just Star Wars, we have thrown out that possibility. So let us know in the chat or the comments. Battersai says, "What EU books would you recommend for my personal canon? You know that I look for books that won't disrupt the canon timeline and that they are a good addition to the Han Solo trilogy, Dark Lords, or like the Han Solo trilogy, Dark Lord, Rise of Darth Vader. I suspect the Lando trilogy as well. In canon, I imagine the Twilight Company, etc., something that adds to canon timeline, but it's not essential for it. Would you say Bane trilogy won't, or I would say Bane trilogy won't qualify because it's likely they would adapt Bane to canon. With same with Plagueis novel. Well, I mean, okay, so I'm trying to understand your parameters are basically that anything that doesn't exist in canon yet from Legends that doesn't contradict canon or doesn't directly deal with the character that the canon's going to specifically flesh out. Because I would say Bane, I think you can read Bane absolutely because we have nothing that's close to the Bane trilogy timeline. We have nothing really about that era, that timeline, the end of the Old Republic. So I think that's something that if you're willing to eventually be contradicted in the future by something in canon, you can absolutely read it, and it doesn't change any way you look at canon whatsoever, really. Same with Plagueis. Plagueis is a little tighter because obviously now we got Plagueis and Acolyte. So there's a little bit of timeline mix up, but overall, still the story's pretty much the same. And I would imagine that whatever they end up doing with Plagueis is a variation of what's done in the book already. So I think that's another one you could check out. When it comes to the rest, I'd have to think about it for a little bit because I mean, there's so many to choose from, but I think you're pretty safe with any Old Republic stuff, any Dawn of the Jedi stuff right now. although the Dawn of the Jedi book's not very good. Um, but any of that type of stuff, because it's just so out of the timeline. Anything post Return of the Jedi, you're going to struggle with because it's dealing with Han, Luke, and Leia and their kids and everything that's opposite from Legends or from canon, excuse me, with Ben Solo. Uh, Clone Wars stories, if you want to accept that like they're not going to directly align with the Clone Wars animated TV show, most of them won't really contradict most canon stuff. They just will have a different timeline. So something like Shatterpoint, something like Yoda Dark Rendezvous, those have elements to their story that, aren't completely contradicted by canon. They just are, if you're considering the 3D animated Clone Wars, they take place in very different parts of the timeline. I think Shatterpoint's the safest one, actually. It doesn't really have much to do with the extended Clone Wars. The only major departure is Deba Balaba, who is the master of Kanan, who is very different in Shatterpoint than she is in the Kanan comic or in Bad Batch when you see her one time. But even in the Kanan comic, it's kind of alluded to the fact that maybe Shatterpoint happened. So there's that. I think Yoda Dark Rendezvous, the only major contradiction it has is it's supposed to take place right before Revenge of the Sith, and Ventress is still in it, so she hasn't died yet from like Dark Disciple and all that. So that's something that you would have to, take into account. And she also works for Dooku in that, so it would have to be before season 3 of the Clone Wars, where she doesn't work for Dooku anymore. So there's a lot of things. I recommend checking out my Clone Wars timeline, or checking out really any of my timelines that I've done for the full Legends timeline, because those will show you where certain stories take place, and then you can kind of see maybe things that could fit into canon. I'm going to keep thinking about it, and it is a topic I've thought about doing a video about for a long time, or at least doing a video maybe about books from canon that Legends fans probably would like, and books from Legends that canon fans would kind of like. I've had those videos outlined in my notes for a long time. Maybe you will see it in the future, but yeah, I'll think about it while Sonic answers as well. But they're really, I feel like most of the stuff you can read in Legends will get contradicted by at least the Clone Wars, if not everything post Return of the Jedi. And so it's a tough bridge to cross there for those timelines.
I mean, a personal favorite of mine that is sort of canon, but not in the same exact place in the timeline, but with all the same name characters, with the general plot of the conclusion of that story is Outbound Flight. I think canon Outbound Flight obviously doesn't include Anakin and Obi-Wan's little misadventures and then detour, but like the Jedi apprentice that is of Jor's, she's there. She's basically listed. We know Thrawn's brother was also presumed dead on that. I think that you can read and just be like, okay, I can get George Cardis' story. He might be a character that kind of floats around. Like there's ways that you can read that book. And I would say like just ignore all the stuff with Obi-Wan and Anakin, and it still pretty much works. And honestly, you could even say Obi-Wan and Anakin show up, and then because at the end of the day, this is a mild spoiler, they don't obviously stay, right? Because Outbound Flight crashes and burns and explodes, so they can't quite literally be on that, right? So I think that would raise some suspicions for Obi-Wan and Anakin and probably change a lot of different things about the course of the galaxy. But yeah, I think you can still read that. I mean, I haven't read the Thrawn Ascendancy trilogy myself, but from what I've gathered, it is basically a reference as happening just much earlier. Like I want to say 15, 20 years before. So I don't know if that also plays into maybe I think Thrawn might be a little older too in canon versus Legends, but
Mhm.
you can read that and you can get pretty much the version of the story that exists, right? And then ascendancy is like, oh, but yeah, this is what we have of collected minor data, right? That's how I'd look at it. Like Liam said, Plagueis for the most part kind of works too. Darth Bane, like I don't expect those stories to be well, actually, Bane could be different because we know Bane, like just what George's insistence on core bombing Moraband and the different armor, like it could be very much like we get away from the basilisk armor or he has it still, but this is actually what he wears before. Like I'm not really sure how they're gonna adapt Bane, and we do know that he dies basically 1,000 years before everything that happens timeline wise in the main Skywalker saga, as like, told in a Star Wars comic in the 2020 line, when strange enough, Luke meets a High Republic Jedi through a weird fungus hive memory database thing. It's hard to explain, but it's one of the best comic-ish singles that in that run for sure. But um, yeah. I mean, you could also say Kenobi, honestly, to a degree.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything that says it can't fit there. I do think that there is a little bit more in canon that kind of insists on Obi-Wan being a little bit quieter. But again, we've seen Obi-Wan Kenobi. It's a very tight fit into the canon. There are things like that were pretty much unnecessary, like Riva hunting down Luke and just by coincidence not showing the lightsaber, so you can kind of dispel it to the child, like, hey, you're just some crazy Tusken Raider or something was attacking you, like you're misremembering it because there's no lightsaber shown, right? For only Baru and Uncle Owen got to see a little bit more of her using her powers and stuff like that. But you've made that working canon, right? So I don't see why Kenobi can't fit in here. And that's when I was saying like it can be adapted as all sort of like a mythological story about Obi-Wan, right? Maybe this could be someone who is aware of Obi-Wan's legend in the Clone Wars and before, and is on Tatooine, and then tells this like grand story that maybe some details are 100% in line with the Kenobi novel. Some are like not entirely. And again, that is one of those stories where you can almost like play around with like what is truth and what is fiction, because he isn't, spoiler alert, like really the main character. We get very minimal POVs. I think the only things would be like that we'd have to like kind of ignore, like how he's trying to like train with Qui-Gon and trying to reach out to Qui-Gon. I think maybe canon has him like a little bit like unprepared to like really go dive into that quite yet. So, and then obviously everything with a shard head, I think he would be someone you can play a little bit more as like an apocryphal story as opposed to someone who's actually real, because I don't know if we can really ignore how much of the one Sith is kind of dependent on fleshing out so much of history, Fate of the Jedi, and then Legacy finally has him popping up again, despite being the child of a Tusken Jedi who Anakin knows from Jabim and all that. So tough one, tough one. I don't know. Yeah, definitely. You can't do like a Shadows of the Empire or anything anymore. Those things have been overwritten 100%. But I guess that's where I would end my list. That it really is anything pre the Clone Wars you're still mostly good at, as long as it doesn't touch the High Republic era. And even then, you can just play around with it, because so much of the High Republic era and its big conflict is pretty much sequestered away in history by the ultimate failure of the villain.
Yeah, I pulled up the timeline just to refresh myself on which things I was missing. And I mean, I agree and disagree about Bane. Like, they're gonna change everything, no matter what. When all this stuff comes into canon, they're gonna change it. It's not gonna be the exact same way. So you have to, I guess, read it. If you're wanting to just be a completely canon only person, you'd have to read these stories with the acceptance of the fact that it will change. It won't be one to one. But I think with Bane, the thing that's different with Bane and canon, and yes, Elzar does say that about Bane. I guess the thing with Bane is they think he dies though around there, and he doesn't, because he tricks this other person into killing. I don't want to spoil the book for you guys if you haven't read it, but Bane and Xana uses her Sith sorcery in order to trick the Jedi to make them think they killed Bane, and they actually didn't. But then Bane, stays basically dead the whole time to the Jedi. So there's that, and then Plagueis, I think, will dramatically change in canon. But I think Outbound Flight's an interesting one as well, because it is, yeah, the timeline's really off from what canon would do. But with canon, and then also the kind of ultimate ending of Outbound Flight, Thrawn's exile, that type of stuff is completely different from what canon does. But it's on a similar vibe. Like, it's a similar reason why Thrawn is outlawed. But Zahn just goes way deeper with the Chiss mythology and canon, and so therefore kind of expands the whole thing, and ultimately kind of changes Thrawn's outlaw or Thrawn's banishment to be something more akin to an actual mission rather than he's actually banished. So there are some big changes. So really, I mean, I was kind of scrolling through here. There's very, very few. I think unless you just want to read kind of character centric, and it's one of the things we give Legends credit for over canon in the past, and it's one of the reasons why a lot of people I think still prefer the Legends style of storytelling is the fact that most of these books do actually try to tell significant stories in the Star Wars universe. They're not like canon where they're like a character moment book. Um, so there's that. I would say Coruscant Knights trilogy is one that probably could fit in there. You could, I mean, if you want to believe that Han Solo had a run in with zombies, you could read Death Troopers. Um, that's another one that could kind of stand on its own. The ones that take place between A New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back, like Honor Among Thieves, Razor's Edge, those ones possibly, even Splinter of the Mind's Eye, possibly. Like, there's nothing directly contradicting those. They just are very different takes on the characters. But outside of that, and there's not too many. Like you mentioned earlier, you you read the Han Solo Adventures. So the Han Solo Adventures and Lando Adventures, I think, are harmless enough in terms of lore that those can fit in. But yeah, there's very few. I think I'm with Sonic on Kenobi though, because so ultimately it's kind of the same thing as Outbound Flight to me. Like the ultimate outcome of Kenobi, the fact that he's like he learns all the lessons he learns in the Obi-Wan Kenobi show. By the end, he learns to accept himself, he learns how to move on from his past and move into the Ben Kenobi direction. It's all the same lessons, so it would be a little weird if you're pairing it with canon that like he has to relearn those again 10 years later. But the story itself hasn't been contradicted. Like 98% of the story is still there. So you could read that one as well. But it's a good question. It's something I've thought about a lot. And I've honestly, 4 videos in the past have full outlines in my notes of like an attempted like timeline for canon fans who want to read Legends and timeline for Legends fans who want to read canon, where it still works in both. But it is a tough, very tough timeline to make. Ultimately, kind of why I scrapped those videos. But thanks for that question. We're going to wrap up here in the next few questions. So we only have a few more, but we're going to scroll back up to the top because we've taken 2 from pretty much everybody in the chat and go back to Critical Thinker, who says, hopefully the current All In and KO storylines will be more like Metal and Balance, the more of off the wall stuff with more consistently solid execution. If the books had kept going after, okay, so that was back on your DC point. And then this is back to Star Wars. If books had kept going after Crucible, who do you think would have taken the new focus as the original trilogy cast started getting phased out, assuming editorial let them do that? I think the Young Jedi Knights cast would have been an excellent new lead group. Jaina, Ben, Alana would make sense as central focal points of each successive generation. But as the new elders, the Young Jedi Knights cast take Luke, Han, Leia's place as the de facto leaders of the Jedi. Alana should become some kind of big leader eventually due to the prophecy, but it makes sense for that to be later down the line than immediately right where the book left off. I mean, I'm in agreement with you. I think those 3 characters are being set up as the next generation throughout all those stories. I think specifically Jaina would take the biggest role, not the least of which, all 3 of them are on completely different age levels. Jaina's significantly older than Ben. Ben's significantly older than Alana. So it's, you kind of have each generation, and in doing so, maybe you could tell the adventures of Jaina as more, you know, adult level classic Star Wars type stories. Then you have the younger, kind of like a what would be young adult or like border between young adults and adult novels with Ben and his group of friends and all that. And then you could do the Young Jedi Knights slash Junior Jedi Knights style stories with Alana moving in to the future. You could have done it that way and kind of redone a Bantam era style different tiers of storytelling. Because other than that, you'd have to jump a ways for them to be all kind of on the even playing field. I know, the power levels they could be, but with Jaina is so like we forget how much older Jaina is than all three of them, but especially Ben, because Ben being that next generation of Luke's family, people often think of him as the same age as Anakin, Jaina, and Jason. He's not anywhere close. He's like 20 years younger. So yeah, I think you would do that, and then subsequently you'd have to group each person with their friends and companions who actually would make sense for those age levels to tell a story about each one of their kind of generation, because they are not necessarily part of the same generation. But yeah, I think that's where they would have gone. And I think Jaina, and like you said, critical thinker, there's no way they were letting them completely drop Luke Leia Han ever, really. They would have to do kind of a legacy-esque thing and be like, okay, now we're jumping to 50 years after Crucible, and Jane is still alive. All these other characters are still alive, but Luke, Leia, and Han have passed away. That's the only way they phase out those characters completely. But assuming they did, I think Jaina would fully take the lead for the most part. She'd be the new Luke. She would be the new person who's like in everything and unifying everything.
Yeah, I agree with the lineup. It's I don't know. I could see maybe a Tahiri kind of show up too if we're gonna rectify some of her character too. Like she has such a huge shift between where she's in New Jedi Order and Legacy of the Force, and how she's manipulated by Jason, and then kind of freed from that, and then she shows up a bit and she's got a weird path, right? And she's like the one connective tissue that we have truly, besides obviously Jaina being Anakin's sister, but truly to like the intimate thoughts and feelings and memories of Anakin, especially as a child soldier. So I'd be very interested to see like what she would almost bring to the table too in conversation, what Jaina has, because Jaina, she I like a lot of what she does, but she's more Han than anything else. And I'm not saying that it wouldn't work, but Anakin was primed as like the Jedi. It wasn't Jason, it wasn't Jaina, it was the youngest sibling, right? So it'd be very interesting to see like her reckoning with that and all that. And we know that she was gonna have a sort of the Jedi trilogy that got canceled. So it'd be very interesting how that would have played out. Because like you brought it before and I brought it before. There's a lot of imperial apologia in especially later EU. Like I'm not saying Jagged isn't a bad character. He's pretty fun. I do like the Empire of the Hand connections. There is a way to make it all work, but Jagged at some point becomes the first head of the Fell Empire, and presumably he doesn't have a kid with anyone other than Jaina because his kids have the Force. And I'm not saying it's a prerequisite, but that is what allows him to have like a say in a power struggle of some sorts against the Jedi, to be like very aggressively helpful allies as needed, right? With Imperial Knights. And then how does the Imperial Knights structure work? You got to have some basis of Jedi training and teachings, right? Like, yeah, and I like the Imperial Knights. I think that was actually one of my favorite concepts out of Legacy for sure. It just Jaina being involved, that's the thing. Like it's like you have this whole image of like the Jedi kingdom, the Jedi throne, possibly with Alana, possibly with someone, right? If it's misread by Jason in his dying moments. Doesn't Jaina just kind of upend that? Like, doesn't that kind of undo a lot of it? And we know at the end of the day, we don't hear about any sort of Jedi kingdom or anything that happens to um yeah, I'm sorry, I lost my thought, but we know for a fact that Legacy has no real connection to being like, oh, this prophecy was fulfilled. It very much ignores it, right? Because it was kind of written at the same time. It wasn't really planned to like be fully lined up with Legacy of the Force and how that was being released. It's a weird conundrum that it runs into, right? And the fact that so much of Denning's stories and Alston and Travis is really pushing like collectively like this is the next big step, and then Legacy's like, well, I guess it doesn't really happen. And I know what you're saying, that's an assumption. I don't like the implication goes against the whole sort of Jedi stuff. I agree, but then I don't really see a Jagged Fell just randomly marrying someone from like the Empire of the Hand or some other Imperial, and then being ready at some level. I think a notable, powerful Jedi helped shape like the very pro light side of the Force, pro Jedi martial arts behavior of the Imperial Knights and all that. And if there's anybody that is a martial Jedi at this time, it is Jaina, unfortunately. Ben is a little bit more of like a Kenobi. He's a more of a negotiator. He's peaceful. He's trying to create bonds and ties. I mean, we saw how he is with the Star Kai. Like, I don't know if they necessarily get together, especially with how they do end up separated, but there's potential there, right? So we're not even really sure if he's gonna go the traditional Jedi way himself. But if he were to go in a traditional Jedi way, I don't think it would be very military conflict or Jedi general focused, right? But Imperial Knights very specifically have the same sort of dogma and training of a very martial-led Jedi force, right? They're more comparable to like the Cold War of the Jedi, where they are wearing armor, they are fighting, they have almost their own kind of territories and kingdoms, right? At the end of the day, I don't see if there is anybody, unless it's a totally original new character, that would fit in to make the Fel Empire from the first generation like be at that level and scale required, that by the time you reach Rohan Fel, right, it's multiple generations of force sensitive kings and queens and princesses and princes, right? Like, unfortunately, with how the EU is written, there is a lot more of a genetic focus, and especially with the prequels having come out then with the midichlorians, there's a little bit more genetic predisposition to like bloodlines being pretty important to strength of that. So you can still even write it where like she does have a child with Jagged, but she doesn't ultimately stay with the Empire, right? She's almost like between two worlds, but ultimately still is like, I'm part of the Jedi. At the end of the day, she has to break allegiance with her, everything that Jagged wants to do and stuff, right? And it could just be, at the end of the day, ultimately more about like a philosophical stance. And that's why I think that would work for a legacy. But I still think in some ways, with how later EU is written with the prequel influence, unless you're going to suddenly have somebody who has a bloodline as powerful as the Skywalkers, I don't really see the Fel Empire within a generation being already at the level of like a diminished Jedi Order. That's what I'm thinking. I I just don't see it. I don't. I I I know what you guys are saying. I know Batista is also kind of getting into this, but I just don't see the EU writers of the late EU being like, "Oh no, we just found like another Jedi." Like, if we're going to suddenly say a much younger Tahiri Vela is going to be Jagged Fell's wife, like, no, I don't see that. Right? Could it be a totally original new character? Yes, but then they'd also have to have like introduction to sort of Jedi, and then another series where they're a little bit more central. Like, I feel like it'd have to be someone built up as Jagged continues to grow before the Empire is like fully reaches the form, or at least a prototype of what we see in the Legacy comics.
Well, I think that's going to wrap up our first Q&A only dedicated live stream, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. This is the format we're going to be looking at moving forward. So let us know what you thought of it. Let us know in the chat, in the comments. Did you like it? What would you like to see differently? What would you change? What would you suggest? Let us know in the chat. Hopefully we got to as many people as we could tonight. Make sure you hit the like button if you haven't. More people are watching right now than have liked. Comment below. Let us know your thoughts. And also subscribe for more content just like this. We've got our shorts every week. We've got videos coming up. We just spoke about Master of Evil a little bit earlier. We are recording our review for that tonight, and we're going to get that video up to you tomorrow so you can hear our thoughts on the latest Star Wars book. That book did just come out today. So make sure you check that out. I think you should also check out our Last Order review. If you haven't, if you're interested in hearing our thoughts on the first Star Wars content post Rise of Skywalker, make sure you check out that review. It is non-spoiler, so if you don't want to know what the story itself is about, you won't in that review. Make sure you check out our Visions content if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching the stream tonight, everybody, and we will see you all next week.